Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tony Swafford, and I chair Adams & Reese Crisis Management Team and our firm's Coronavirus Task Force. Our goal with this group is to get concise information to our clients and those interested in a timely fashion. Along those lines, in addition to the alerts that many of you have been receiving from the firm, we're also rolling out today a series of webinars. The design is for these to be 20 minutes in length with some time for Q&A afterwards, and to try to address legal issues that are at the forefront of the crisis. Today's webinar is going to be presented by Roy Hadley, a lawyer down in our Atlanta office who has a global practice in technology, which includes data security issues, privacy concerns, business continuity, incident response, and all things related to technology and the many crises that can be associated with technologies. While Roy is speaking, you're going to have the opportunity to submit questions. I encourage you to do that. We're going to try to stick to the 20 minutes so we can get you in and out of here. And I will try to sort through those questions, and those related to today's topic, we'll get to as many as we can. With that, Roy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Tony. On behalf of Adams & Reese and the Privacy, Cybersecurity, and Data Management Practice Team, happy to have you here today. Question, why are we here today? We're here because of what I think Nassim Taleb would call a black swan event. The coronavirus, COVID-19, whatever you want to call it, the effects are being felt around the world. If you see on your screen right now, that's a map. That map is about 5 or 6 days old, and it really kind of shows you the coverage. It's probably even more now. So, the thing I'll say to everyone on the call, and, what we're going to do today, two things. One is I'm going to tell you some things that we're seeing out there right now, real world frontline that can affect your organization as you are in this phase of dealing with this operationally. Secondly, at the end, and we probably won't go through them, but they'll be in the slide deck and we can get that to everybody, just operational cyber hygiene things that you just need to be aware of. As Winston Churchill would say, this is not the end, it's not even beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning. And what I'll say to everybody is this too shall pass. We'll get past this, but what you need to know is in the moment, in the crisis right now, there are things that you need to be looking for and things that you need to be considering. The first of which is the reality of, or the difference between business continuity planning and business continuity reality. We're in the reality phase right now to a certain extent because we are experiencing things that I think most people on this call would admit we really didn't think about. We really didn't consider in our business continuity plans that schools would be closed across the country, that supply chains would be affected worldwide, that healthcare systems would be greatly stressed both in the U.S. and globally. Quarantines and restrictions are being put into place daily on the state, local, and national levels, and globally. So those are the things that are now stressing our business continuity plans. That said, things never happen the way you think, and you always need to be prepared for the unexpected. First thing I want to talk about really is cyber attacks will ramp up, and so don't take your eyes off the ball. Espionage is becoming more prevalent. We're seeing out there real world right now because people are mobile and remote and logging into networks. Security is of utmost concern. We'll talk about that later. But what you're seeing is that people are trying to get into your networks. And quite honestly, it's going to be a little bit easier because you don't have the control that you normally would have. Also, people are making quick decisions. People are trying to respond to real world issues right away and are making quick decisions. Because of that, you're going to see a lot of cyber attacks ramping up. Hospitals, in particular healthcare facilities, are at great risk because a cyber attack or a ransomware attack really can be devastating in the current situation where you are trying to treat people. Hospital in the Czech Czech Republic, one of the largest labs in their country, testing labs, was just hit by a cyber attack. These things are happening. Things are being shut down. One other thing that you need to look out for with respect to cyber attacks is you're starting to see a lot of mobile apps that can go on phones that quote unquote track COVID-19 and track infections and things like that. A lot of those are malicious. They are designed to basically get into the phones, get into your network, deliver malicious software, deliver ransomware attacks. So start looking for mobile apps that you see out there. That's going to be one that is going to really start rearing its ugly head in the short term. Speaking of ransomware attacks, again, they are really proliferating right now because if you are hit by a ransomware attack right now while everybody is mobile or remote, it's going to be particularly devastating because a lot of your IT people are also remote. So keep a particular eye out on ransomware, do all your cyber hygiene around that. One thing I do want to mention to everybody on this call is that you're starting to see different things, especially around, again, COVID-19 and the coronavirus. There was an Android app that didn't come through the Google Store, the Google Play Store, but was downloadable off of the internet called COVID Lock. And it was supposedly to allow you to track the virus and the spread of the virus in your immediate area. It was delivering ransomware attacks. But it was interesting because when you looked at it, it was quote unquote endorsed by the CDC, the World Health Organization. So these bad actors are being particularly good at utilizing this crisis that we're engaged in to deliver these bad applications, this malicious software, those sorts of things. So you need to be particularly careful of that. Again, healthcare providers right now are a prime target. Phishing and spear phishing will become more prevalent. And that's, again, because coronavirus and COVID-19 are such heavily searched terms right now, they are prime for phishing attacks. According to the latest information, the coronavirus-themed websites are one of the hottest in terms of being registered right now, and they are 50% more likely to be a front for malicious activity than a regular website. So, you might want to consider on your networks, and not only yourself, not clicking on any links that come through about coronavirus or COVID-19, but also put some filters or restrictions on your networks if you can to prevent your employees from, clicking on and going to these websites, because most of them are malicious and are designed to either put malware on your networks or deliver ransomware to your networks. You're also starting to see out there a lot of state-sponsored attempts ramping up. These emails will look like they come from the CDC. They'll look like they come from the World Health Organization, even look like they come from your IT department or your HR department. I had a client that did a phishing kind of test right before Valentine's Day, and what they did was they said the HR department has negotiated a special rate on a dozen red roses. Click here to get the rate and the coupon. They had over a 60% click-through rate on that alone. And so you're starting to see those types of things with respect to COVID-19 and coronavirus. So now is the time to reinforce that training that you've had with your employees around, phishing and don't click the link, even if it looks real, even if it looks like it came from the CDC or from your state or local health organization. People are hungry for information. There's a lot of misinformation out there. So now is the time to really reinforce those best practices and the cyber hygiene. On security and connectivity, everybody is going remote right now. you're seeing all your schools going remote. You're seeing all your businesses going remote. One thing that you need to think about is, what is going to happen if you can't get on, if you experience network delays, those sorts of things. A lot of the school systems right now, and in this respect, it's been fortuitous, are on spring break, or have extended spring breaks. But in the next couple of weeks, we're going to see a lot more people come onto platforms like this for webinars, onto Zoom, onto Skype, and all of those sorts of video platforms. And so those platforms themselves will be stress tests over the next few weeks. So you just need to think about your plan B if you don't have those types of services, or if they are delayed, or the networks are impacted. So think about that. From the standpoint of letting people onto your network remotely, you need to think about those things that you always should be thinking about, such as having multi-factor authentication in place, having tokens if you don't have multi-factor authentication in place via cell phones, those sorts of things. You also need to, and I'm going to get a little technical here, you need to think about credentialing, administrative privileges, who should have the right to do certain things remotely. Not everybody should have the ability to remote access your networks. So you just need to think about that. Also think about help desk. As you are putting these things in place, the help desk needs will really ramp up. And so you will start to see people have trouble, and so they need to have some type of help. So whether you can do it internally or whether you have to get external resources, now's the time to start thinking about that. The other thing that you have to think about is their connectivity. Not everybody has high-speed Wi-Fi, so you need to think about connectivity, whether you need to get some hotspots or those sorts of things. Now's the time to start thinking about this as your workers are starting to go remote. You're starting to see more municipalities, states mandate kind of closures and social distancing. So we really need to start thinking about that. Also, when you are putting these things out there and getting these new vendors, you really need to make an effort to understand the vendor's security posture. You also need to understand what their hygiene looks like. So don't just go out and procure these services. You really need to continue to do all of that cyber hygiene with respect to your vendors that you've always done, because I'm not going to say most, a lot of data breaches happen because of vendors and not necessarily your network or your users. So you need to really be careful of that. And vendors are a prime target for cyber criminals, because if you can impact a managed service provider, then you've also impacted all of their customers. So that's where the goal is, and that's where the criminals are going to be focused. So just make sure that as you go forward, you're thinking about those sorts of things. Speaking of vendors, we'll just roll right into your contracts and communicating with your vendors. As you acquire these services, one other thing that you probably should do is just talk to your vendors and ask them, kind of straight up, are they going to be able to perform? Are their networks robust enough and their service offerings robust enough to perform the services that you are asking of them? A good example, I was trying to log on to a conference call yesterday, and it took me about 10 tries before I could get through on that 800 number. And it's just volume. And so you need to be thinking about that kind of volume with respect to your vendors when you are out there. Also, you need to think about, do you have emergency procurement procedures in place? Let's say your plan A, the vendor that you've had for remote access and dial-in, isn't working. Do you have in place the mechanism, especially with municipalities right now and governmental agencies? Do you have the ability to quickly procure services from your quote-unquote plan B. Now's the time to be thinking about that, not when you are trying to get out there and do it. And again, look at your vendors and what their security postures are, because that's going to be very important. Kind of rolling on now, the one thing that I want to make sure that everybody thinks about also is privacy. Privacy is going to be a big issue, especially when we start talking about COVID-19 and employees being out, asked to quarantine themselves. How do you keep that information private? You've got HIPAA out there with respect to healthcare, and so there are all sorts of things that you need to be thinking about. CCPA, which is California Consumer Privacy Act, you need to think about that, and other states are starting to implement those types of privacy legislations out. So you need to think about it. GDPR with the European Union if you're doing business internationally. And so all of these privacy things don't go out the window just because we are where we are with respect to COVID-19. I know there is an inclination to say, oh, it's a state of emergency, but that may not carry the water for you. So always make sure that you're thinking about privacy. We'll kind of wrap it up here. We're getting close to the end of the 20 minutes, but always above everything else, this, like I said at the beginning, this too will pass. This too shall pass. We will move on. We will be in a different place, hopefully, a month from now, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, and that this will get better. But as always, you should be practicing cyber hygiene. If you look at the slide deck, and again, we'll make this available to everybody on the call, things like educating employees, backups, patching, passwords, cyber insurance, segmentation, authentication, Active Directory are all things that you should be thinking about continuously and not just in this particular incident. Again, there are some more cyber hygiene things there that I did want to point out to everybody to see. And then, kind of what are the key takeaways here? The key takeaways are, again, prepare for the unexpected, because nothing is ever going to go like you thought it would. Like I said at the beginning, who would have thought, honestly, that we would be in this situation when you prepared your business continuity plans? Business continuity plans are typically prepared for natural disasters, a network outage, kind of very discrete things that you can get your arms around. What we're dealing with now is so multifaceted that it's scary and fascinating at the same time. So just prepare for the unexpected. You are where you are with respect to your business continuity planning right now, but just remember these things are fluid and you should always be thinking of it that way. Again, nothing will ever go like you thought it would. Know your vendors. Again, know your vendors. Know what their real capabilities are. It's one thing to contractually have requirements and SLAs and those sorts of things, and presumably you can maybe get money damages, but that doesn't make your company or your government operational right now. And that's really the goal, and the key is you need to be operational. Be thorough but flexible. Remember that responses, business continuity has to be dynamic because the incident that you're probably dealing with is dynamic. This one is more dynamic than most, admittedly, but you always need to be thinking ahead, thinking about the what ifs. What might happen is if we are remote and now we suffer a ransomware attack, how are we going to approach that? How are we going to deal with it? Now's the time to think about it before it happens. And then lastly, as we close out, always be thinking about lessons learned. What lessons are you learning? What are your best practices? One of those is to actually log the issues and your responses and how you responded, what worked, what didn't work, and how you approach something. Because again, this too shall pass, but there will be another incident, there will be another crisis, And one key thing that I have found to be very helpful in response planning is an after action report, where you take all those lessons learned, all those incidents, and you basically formulate best practices to then integrate into your incident response plan and your business continuity planning. Lastly, key takeaway, just be flexible. Always be prepared for the unexpected, and you will get through this. I think that's it, Tony. I'm going to wrap up. I think we're right at about 20 minutes. And if we have any questions, happy to entertain those.
Thank you. Not seeing any questions right now, but I do want to let everyone know we appreciate your participation. As Roy mentioned, the audio and the slides for this presentation will be available later this week. Also, as you may have noticed, and we mentioned at the beginning, we're rolling out a series of these webinars. Our task force, which is essentially made up of practitioners in the disciplines that are most affected by this global crisis. That task force is going to be presenting a webinar throughout the month of March on Tuesdays and Thursdays, different topic on every webinar. The next one, which is one I'm sure that is near and dear to your hearts, will be an employment law update related to the coronavirus. Lots of legislation at the state, obviously the federal, and the local levels going on as we speak. That webinar will be Thursday, 2:30 Eastern time as well, and then we'll continue with additional topics for the remainder of the month, as I noted. Thank you again, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you.